Why is it that elites, those in power, and those that have influence seem to have success just draw to them or come in easily? Why is it that most people seem to struggle while there are seemingly a select few that are coasting through life and seem to even be lucky? And speaking of that, is it true that some people are just destined to be lucky, while others are destined to struggle and fail no matter what they do? Now, what if I was to tell you that it isn't up to chance at all? And in fact, there are methods you can utilize in order to make yourself quote-unquote luckier, more fortunate, and more successful. You see, elites, those in notable families, and others who have gained massive success were not born that way, but they did learn very quickly how to become successful using certain methods. And these people were not the chosen few. They're not special in any different regard from you. They just had access to information and methods much earlier at a younger age than you may have. However, in this video, we'll go over the awarenesses they did have that you weren't taught, along with the tools they use again and again to recreate themselves in ways that draws success in to where they are living life exactly as they would like to. It is through gaining these awarenesses and using these methods myself that helped me create a life that I really wanted to live, creating a six-figure business, doing what I love, falling in love with my dream woman, and now having started a family with her, being able to travel and do all these other things because I utilized these methods and these techniques that I'm going to give you in this video. It has also allowed me to help many clients do the same as we teach them things like this at a very deep level to the point where they're getting it. Now, this powerful idea we're going over is called identity shifting, and when done correctly, can absolutely transform your life. So let's go over how to do it. Elites, those in certain circles, secret societies, and so on have known for generations the power of your beliefs and identity in how you create your world. They understood and understand the power of your thoughts, your words, and the way that you feel. Now, for those who could be considered a part of what we can call the parasitic elite, by the way, not all elites or people who are outrageously successful would be categorized here, but there are certainly some that are. They have used these methods and their awareness of these techniques to their advantage in manipulating the masses. Basically, through using certain imaging, brainwashing techniques through media, schools, and so on, to nudge you in the direction of an identity that would better serve them, but not you. A lot of this was built around disempowering, distracting, and confusing you. You can see this easily reflected in a good number of people. However, these same elites and people who are in these circles wouldn't dream of exposing themselves to the same imaging, the same advertising, and so on that the masses are exposed to. In fact, you hear time and time again that the elites who are involved in things like social media and other things like that won't even let their children use it. They won't let them watch TV. They won't let them be exposed to the programming that is involved in all of that. And that's because they understand how this works. They know the impact that would have on their identity and especially on their children's as they start growing up. Now, what these elites do know is that an identity is like velcro, not super glue. And what that means is you can actually remove and try on different identities if you only know how. A new future is always available, yet so many of us have been convinced that you are the way you are and there's no changing it. Sure, you might have velcro on that's really stuck because you've had it on for a long time and you've persisted with it, but it absolutely will come off if you do certain things, which you can then replace it with something you actually want to be. You can replace it with an identity that actually is more aligned to who you are and how you want to show up. Now, for most, they continually reinforce a negative identity that, again, was typically created through the influencing factors you had in your life at a young age. Media, parents who have also been influenced by this, schooling, and everything else. And for most, it has created a pretty negative identity. But in a moment, you're not only going to learn how you can start ripping off this velcro of an identity that isn't serving you, but how also to create a new one that does serve you in your highest and is going to help you start creating reality in the ways that you actually want. So if you have a persisting negative identity, we want to do certain things that are going to more efficiently and effectively allow you to tear off that velcro so it can be replaced. And the first thing we need to do in order to accomplish this is we have to know what you actually want to do. Who do you actually want to be? Because if we have nothing to aim for, it's like you're trying to throw a dart at a dartboard that doesn't exist. Or it's like you have this ship, but you have no captain and crew and no navigation because you have no idea where you want to go. So you can ask yourself, who do I need to become? Or what version of myself do I need to be that will allow me to live the life I want to live? Essentially, who is the person that is living or would be living your dream life? And we're not telling you to actually think of an actual person and like, I'm going to be this celebrity, or not like that. We're talking about what attributes does this person have? How do they carry themselves? And so on. So again, this is something you're going to want to write out in detail. You want to describe it in as much depth as you can. So what is this person's physical attributes, their personality? How do they carry themselves? What do they value? What are their beliefs? That's a big one, by the way. And again, I want to reiterate, if you skip this part, you will not get it. If you don't have something you're aiming for, how can you hit a target? If you go up to a train ticket booth, for example, and they say, where do you want to go? And you say, I don't know, I just don't want to be here. They can't give you a ticket to nowhere. You have to know where you want to go. And so you can't become who you need to become or who you want to become if you have no idea what that looks like. And so I really encourage you to take some time and map out what that looks like for you. Now, once you have more of that mapped out, is when we can go to the next step and we can start releasing and removing everything that's currently in your life that's not supporting you becoming this character or this new identity that you're trying to form. Pay especially close attention to how this upgraded version of you would be thinking and feeling on a consistent basis. Making sure you get that inner world stuff right is going to give you the most effect in the direction you want to go. Because the beliefs this person has, the way they think, the way they feel, is what's going to be mirrored in the outer world. So we need to make sure that we really especially pay attention to this. Again, once you have that mapped out, and again, you don't have to be perfect, you can add things over time. This will be very much a living list or a living exercise that you'll go back to time and time again, especially as you gain more information and you might have more things that come up and, oh, I want that to be a part of me. I don't want this anymore. You'll chop and change based on experience, and then you'll have new preferences or new data to work with. But once you've done that, we want to identify the negative things or the things that are ultimately holding you back from moving into this person. This could be beliefs you currently have right now that you know need to change, behaviors you engage in automatically you know need to change, thoughts you have, habits you have, and so on. This could be environments you hang out in that you know this upgraded version of you would never hang out in because of the effect of that environment, for example. Once you have that mapped out as well, you have an amazing contrast between where you currently are and where you're looking to go. And before we move into anything, we need to be honest about where we currently are and be honestly introspective, even if there are some things that are hard to look at and we don't like some of the beliefs we currently have. By gaining awareness of this, it is a huge step towards becoming this new thing that we're aiming for. And the thing is, a lot of people don't change or shift from identity to identity in a degree that benefits them because they're not willing or have taken the time to do this. You'll be ahead of so many other people just through the awarenesses you will gain through doing these practices. The awareness is being who you want to become and then who you are right now and what needs to be shed away from that in order to help you become this upgraded version, this new identity. Now, you may already be having some ideas come up that are going over how you could start becoming more of this new identity. So let's go over some of the things you're going to be able to do in order to make this happen quicker. Now, before we go over the additive things that you're going to do, we need to go over something that's probably even more important. And this is called releasing the energetic anchors or shadow work of whatever the past is or the things that are holding you back from naturally more becoming this person. Because if you're able to map out this person you want to move into, this expanded version of yourself, it means it does exist and that you can move into it. But there may be things that are holding you back from naturally becoming this person. And so we're going to address now briefly how you can start to do this. Like I mentioned, this is what we call shadow work. This is when you take a look at those unintegrated parts of yourself or those parts that are included in what's called your shadow, in your unconscious, things that we don't normally look at but just because we don't look at them doesn't mean they're not there. And a lot of times these aspects of us, the way they act is kind of like an anchor that's pulling you down to lower levels of consciousness or kind of a lower state of being. And the way I want you to imagine this is imagine you're kind of suspended in water, right? And you can breathe, don't worry, everything's all good. And the higher levels of the water, so towards the surface, is a higher level of consciousness. This is the expanded identity you want to be. This is the version of you that is abundant and prosperous, and all their goals are being achieved, and life is just so much more abundant and beautiful. That is what exists more towards the surface. It's higher levels of consciousness. And inversely, towards the bottom, towards the depths, is when you're reaching more low conscious states. This is where things are a struggle, things are strife. You know, you're not being who you know you could be. You're being taken away into this more negative identity that you don't want. And the thing that's dragging you towards this more negative identity are the anchors that you haven't dealt with. Where if you were just to release those anchors, you would start to naturally float towards the surface. Think about it. If you had these anchors attached that are keeping you suspended at a certain place in the water, is the best solution to swim up towards the surface? Well, no, because as soon as that gets too exhausting, which it will very much after enough time, you'll float right back down to wherever you were because the anchors are still attached to your ankles, these energetic anchors. And so one of the best things that we can do is instead of focusing on I need to add all these things or I need to swim up or whatever else, let me work on cutting these anchors off of me. And when you cut the anchors off, what naturally begins to happen? You become more buoyant. You start to float closer to the surface. It becomes easier to assume this new identity. Now you've actually already identified, if you've done the exercise already, some of the anchors that are pulling you towards the depths. These again are the old habits, the old beliefs, the old actions you've been taking that have been maintaining your current identity that you're now ready to shed and grow beyond. And so you already have an idea of some of those anchors, and you can add to this list over time as things come up. And just recognize that it's these things that are keeping you suspended at the place you're at or even dragging you deeper and are preventing you in a lot of ways from naturally beginning to rise into this other identity that you want to rise into, this other version of yourself that you also mapped out. It is through doing this shadow work that allows us to release these anchors and start naturally floating up. It also then makes it easier to add certain things there because we've already risen up to that level. Now, if I made a whole thing on shadow work in this video, we'd go on way too long and it would take away from what we're doing in this one. However, at the end of this video, I will link you to a full video dedicated to shadow work. So once you've gone through all this, you can watch that next. You'll have everything mapped out, everything you need to start moving, and then you can do the shadow work to start dropping those anchors, which is going to make things so much easier. So look out for that at the end of this video, which will be perfect to watch after this one. Okay, so now that you are more aware of the identity you want to move into, you're aware of where you want to go. Again, you're not trying to buy a train ticket to nowhere. You know where you're trying to go. You know the destination. You know what that looks like, the values you'll have, the beliefs, all of that you're going to be moving into. So how do we start to actually build it so that you're more living it? Well, luckily in this day and age in particular, we can actually use some of the things that had a hand in developing the old identity that's more negative and actually used it to develop the more positive identity through certain media and other things, which we'll get into in just a moment. Understand when we do this though, we need to be very, very disciplined because most of the media out there has more of a negative bias to it and will actually feed the old identity and not the new. Now, one thing I want you to keep in mind, and this is a saying and a quote that is just saturated all through personal development because of how powerful it is, and it's you get what you think about most of the time. And we can also throw in feel about, but you get what you think about most of the time. You know, a thought that you think over and over and over again eventually is going to become a belief, and enough times down the line that is eventually going to form part of your identity or become an identity. Because you've been thinking about it all of the time, it eventually becomes so solidified within you, it becomes a part of your identity. So the base level, or close to the base level, is very much thought. So much of this is coming from thought. It is even said that you have about 60,000 to 80,000 thoughts every single day, if you can believe that, right? If you can imagine 60 to 80,000 every single day. And it is also said for the average person, 95% of the thoughts you have one day to the next are the same or similar. And if you're getting what you think about most of the time, no wonder people almost never change. And the real thing is, it's not that people don't change, it's that they are recreating and reinforcing the same identity over and over and over again. They absolutely have the power to change if they would start thinking differently, if they would start mapping this out, which would cause them to do so. But what's really going on is from day one to day two, day in, day out, people are thinking the same thoughts, the same level of energy with their thoughts 95% of the time, and they're doing that 60 to 80,000 times a day. You want to talk about reinforcing an identity. So no wonder people seem like they're not changing, when what's really happening is they're just recreating the same thing over and over and over again, and maybe with slight variations, but basically the same thing. And so if you want to change and move into this new identity, you are going to have to think differently. You are going to have to be more intentional, get out of autopilot, and be more selective about the thoughts you let in. Now here's the magic to it. I want to give you an analogy known as the tracks in the snow. You see, the way the neural connections work in our mind is the more you think about something, the more you engage with a certain idea, you create a stronger neural connection in your brain. And what that means is it becomes easier to access that neural connection. So if you have a certain belief and you keep thinking about it and keep believing it, it becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. It starts to become a conviction. You do that long enough, it starts to become more of the identity, right? And the way you can think of it is like there are tracks in the snow. And so imagine there's this like deep level of snow, but this belief or whatever else it is, there's this deep groove, almost like a road going through the snow, and it's very easy to access and drive or walk down that road because you've traveled down it many different times. But in this analogy and how it works with the brain as well, you either use it or lose it. And so if you do not keep going down that road, it's as if snow is always constantly slightly and slowly and gently falling and covering the road. Now, if you keep walking down that road, it won't matter because you'll just, any snow that starts to form, you're walking through it, you'll keep the track. But if you stop walking down the road, if you stop reinforcing a belief or thinking a certain thought that leads to that, if you stop engaging in a certain behavior that has that kind of highway going through the snow as well, it starts to become covered up. And over time, it gets harder and harder to access. And it becomes actually something that you stop thinking about. Now, on the same or on the other side of the same coin, we can use this to start forming these new beliefs and everything else that are involved with your new identity. And so at first, it's going to be a bit tricky. You're going to have to remind yourself to do it. You're going to have to snap yourself out of autopilot and more intentionally think certain things. And then you start to walk down that track. Now there's this big mountain of snow, but you keep walking, right? And at first, it's a struggle. At first, it's not working as well because there's this big pile of snow you're walking through, right? But then you do it again. And then you do it again. And then you keep thinking about it. And then you keep moving from it. And then you take another action towards it. And then you speak more about it. And then you feel more about it. And suddenly you're starting to create this groove, this track in the snow for whatever it is that's contributing to this new identity. So it happens in two ways. By you focusing on just being the person in this identity, being it now the best you can, you not only start to create those new tracks in the snow, but as a byproduct, you are turning your back to the other tracks that were feeding into the old identity. So the things that were more negative identity, the snow starts to come and starts covering them up. Just by not using it, it starts to be pruned away. It starts to be cleared away, and it starts to create this layer of snow, which makes it harder to access. Now again, a way to expedite this is the shadow work. Think of the shadow work as putting kind of piles of snow now on that neural connection. Sometimes you can do it in a very short amount of time. But just by turning your back to that old identity the best you can, and you'll get hooked sometimes, you'll go back sometimes, that's okay. That's normal. Just get back on the horse as soon as you can. Get back going down the tracks you want to go down. And again, the deeper those tracks are, the more you'll be pulled to it, and you have to be more intentional and wake yourself up. But again, as you start creating this new identity and you start thinking more in that direction, you start being more intentional, one great practice, keep looking at what you wrote down as far as the new identity. Another great practice, again, those anchors you put down, the things that you need to remove, start removing them. If you're going to places that reinforce the old identity, stop going to those places. That'll cover up those tracks very quickly. If you are engaging in certain behaviors that are a part of that old identity that doesn't support the new, start weaning yourself off that the best that you can. that will start creating a cover up. It will start covering those tracks in the snow, making it a lot easier to now focus on these new tracks that you're creating. I want to remind you of an idea. Maybe it's the first time you're hearing about it, but you're in what's called infinite action. And what this means is you're always creating tracks in the snow in one direction or not. There's really no turning it off. Another way of saying that is you're always sending out an energetic signal that's being reflected back to you. And so why it's so important to be intentional, why it's so important to expose yourself to who you want to become often, is because in every moment you're sending that out. In every moment you're directing those tracks in some direction. Right? And so the more, again, you remember that you're in infinite action and start directing them in the direction you actually want to go, the quicker this begins to build. Now, again, I'm going to give you kind of a cheat code in how to do this. I'm going to give you another one that I wasn't going to include as well. So I'm going to give you two cheat codes that are going to really help with this, where one, we're using the media that actually brainwashed you to your advantage. So we are going to go over that, and it's going to really help with infinite action. But just keep in mind, you are in infinite action, always sending out that signal. You're always putting tracks in some direction, and that's just the way it works. It doesn't care if you go unconscious. It doesn't care if you're an autopilot. That is still happening regardless. Now, there's another analogy I want to give you, but before I do, I'm going to give you that thing you can do with the media. So ultimately, a lot of negative media, and this includes books you read. Books are an interesting one we'll get into in a moment, but online media, social media, the news, all of these different things are calibrated at a certain level of energy and certain level of thought. For example, watch the news and see where your thinking is. Observe the level of your thoughts. And also the trick is, it's not always your thoughts. You're picking up thoughts that are on a similar wavelength to whatever energy of the thing is you're engaging with. But you'll realize they're not so great, are they? They're probably pretty negative. They're probably you catastrophizing about things. You're in fear, whatever else it is. And so we want to cut ourselves off from those kinds of things. This is a part of releasing the anchors. Start cutting yourself off from things you know are not serving you. So that means things on social media that are distracting you, that aren't things that are elevating you or helping you, right? Things that are putting you in a negative place when you are feeling so negative, and it's kind of, they call it like doom scrolling too. Please stop doing that, because again, what are you doing through infinite action? What tracks in the snow are you creating when you're doing that? Right? So create some barriers or blocks or other things from accessing that material. However, there are things on social media and online, and especially books, which we'll get into in just a moment, that you can utilize to allow yourself to be sending out a signal or tracks in the snow more consistently that serve you. Now with social media, be very, very careful. This is why I said you want to have discipline, because I would say about 95, 96, 97, maybe even more % of social media is going to be absolute garbage when it comes to creating this new identity. Now there are plenty of videos on YouTube you can watch. There are plenty of things you can do online, getting into courses, right? Different articles, these kinds of things. But recognizing that a lot out there is going to be to your detriment, especially from infinite action. So what you can do, for example, have a playlist of videos put you in a good place. Have, only creators that serve you in that way, and don't allow things to come up on your homepage. Literally block it. My homepage on YouTube, by the way, is blocked. I don't have a homepage. I just have subscriptions, and that's it. If I want to watch something very specific, I can search for it and then specifically watch that thing if I want the information or want to utilize this technique or whatever else it is. These platforms are notorious and expertly able to hook you and take you on a ride that's distraction-oriented, and again, causing you to create tracks in the snow more from that negative identity. So you want to be very disciplined with this, but if you can be disciplined with this, you can utilize it to your advantage. Now, if you can't be, and again, I'm a YouTube creator, I'm on here creating stuff, so I'm telling the truth when I say this, because I have I want you to watch my videos, right? However, if you feel like you can't discipline yourself on the platform yet, I would honestly say don't go on it until you can. Right? To spend at least a week or so off it, because if you're going on it, watching things that are distracting you and taking you away from this new identity, it's going to be way more detrimental. If you watch like one video like this, but then 10 that distract you and you're off to the races, that's more detrimental than beneficial. And so in that case, you may want to take some time away from social media, especially ones like TikTok, Instagram, things that are so, quick scrolling and, videos that are like 20 seconds long and boom, just hits a dopamine. You can really spiral with that stuff. And so that's the first thing, removing that and then replacing it with media and other things that are at a good energy teaching you and are allowing you to create tracks in the snow in a good direction. Here's the thing when you're doing that. Even if you're not completely absorbing the information, even if you haven't understood absolutely everything, as long as you're engaging with whatever that is, you're creating good tracks in the snow. Most people think that it's only the information in videos that they want, but information's not going to get you where you want. You know, there's so much information. We live in the information age, and most people are still living lives of quiet desperation. That's not it. But the energetic transference from certain things will absolutely influence you. The way it helps you with infinite action in creating the tracks in the snow, if you allow it, will absolutely get you to where you want to go, or at least assist you. Now, one other thing I will mention with other forms of media, I'm going to especially highlight books. Every second you're reading and fully engaged with a book that we'll say is high conscious or high energy, or would be something that your new identity would read, every second you're doing that, you are creating good tracks in the snow. It is not about how fast you read. It is not even about how well you absorb the information. Again, get out of this idea that information is what you need to get to the next level. Look at all the information you've accumulated to now that maybe you're not in that much of a better place. If you want to make quantum leaps in your life, don't be just an information gatherer, right? And so as you're reading these books, though, and you're engaged in that process, let's say you read for 30 minutes, that was 30 minutes that you created tracks in the snow towards that new identity. And also 30 minutes you didn't spend reinforcing tracks in the snow towards that old identity that you're looking to shed. Let's say you read 30 more minutes. That's more 30 minutes in infinite action that you were in a good energy. Again, you were releasing anchors, that you were rising more to the surface, where you were creating those tracks in the snow. Simply by engaging in different forms of media that are calibrated in a simple place, in each moment you're engaging with that, it is helping you create more tracks in the snow. And so throughout the day, by listening to certain things, audio's the other one, by the way, so listening to certain things, reading certain things, and watching certain things, if you do it correctly, you'll be creating so many amazing tracks in the snow. You will notice your thinking is changing. Your automatic thoughts are beginning to change. This is how you know it's beginning to work, because you're now thinking a little bit more like this new identity that you're trying to create. You're like, wow, I'm a lot more positive for some reason. Wow, I have much more of this can-do attitude rather than can't-do attitude over here. You'll start to notice some differences occurring. So something else I want to go over really quick is going to be massive with this, because what ends up happening when someone wants to create a new identity or has a goal to do anything, it doesn't just have to be an identity. Although when you're trying to achieve a goal, you are, in a sense, trying to create an identity, the identity of the person who is worthy of the goal. So you're still kind of doing that. But ultimately what happens with a lot of people is they create this identity, they have this other one, and they put all of this importance on needing to be this person. And I want to tell you that if you do that, you're going to create a lot of challenges and blocks for yourself. And so what I want you to aim to do is, once you have this identity, you're doing some of these things we've gone over, you know, maybe you're watching or learning from other things, you're adding to this process or whatever else, it is crucial that you lower the importance. You see, if you make it so that it's a life or death that you achieve this thing, you're actually going to repel it from you. Now again, lowering the importance doesn't mean you're lowering the priority. You're still putting focus on it, but you're not making it life or death. You're kind of having the attitude of, you know, it's going to be this or something better. Like everything's going to be fine. You're not putting this pedestalization energy on it, this neediness energy on it. And if you want an example of how this can work in a real life situation, just look at neediness in, let's say, dating dynamics. If you're a woman watching this and someone's been insanely needy towards you, and let's say as a man being needy towards you, did that attract you to them or did it repel you? And some men have experienced this as well. If someone's been, and it doesn't have to be relationships that are romantic, it could be anything. Friendship, someone who really wants to be your friend, and they're kind of like making you responsible for their happiness. Has that been attractive for the most part, or has that been repellent? For most people, and in most healthy situations, it is being repellent. It is the same with this identity. If you make it the be-all, end-all, so important, you are repelling that identity from coming in and actually being situated within you. However, if you lower the importance while also keeping the priority high, it will start to fly in so much faster. It will start revealing to you some of the things you need to do to bring it in quicker. And so if you ever feel like you're raising the importance, just take a moment and remind yourself to lower the importance. And then also, remember what I said earlier, if you fall off the horse, you notice I'm raising the importance, it's okay. Just get back on the horse. Don't worry, it's not about if you fall off, we're all gonna fall off. We're all gonna go back to the old identity sometimes. We're gonna get sucked in, we're gonna watch some stuff and we're like, ah crap, I'm creating tracks in the snow that I don't want versus the ones I do want right now. It's okay. Again, don't raise the importance of that. Just go, okay, I slipped up. It's all good. It's not that, it's fine. Everything's gonna be fine. let's get back on the horse. Now, if you want to learn how to create your reality and shift your identity as fast as possible using proven methods, working with me while doing so, you can check out our reality creation program called Max It that is linked in the first link in the description down below. You can learn a little more about it, what it's done for people, and potentially apply to be in the program if it's something that resonates with you. Now, anyway, I did promise you another video that's going to help with what you learned here. After you've absorbed this, I recommend going over here next. We're going to go over shadow work. It's a big piece of this process, but I didn't want this video to be an hour long, so you can go watch this next if you feel this is something you need to work on.